And I believe we have about 25 minutes for Q&A. So once again, for speakers, thank you very much for your presentations. Can you see me? Thank you so much for your presentations. And as we have mentioned in the beginning, we are connected via Zoom and YouTube. And we also have been receiving questions from our YouTube and online participants. And we do have a question here. And this question is for Ms. Duong Big Tan from UNESCO Bangkok office. And let me just read the question verbatim. ICH was something that was accumulated by humanity, and I believe that it carries value in itself. But the future, we can see that it's possible to also see new cultures spring up in the process. As time goes by. So the reason why I say this is because we have AI robots. We may be seeing completely different forms of culture that may not be something from humanity. So in the process of focusing on ICH and its impact on education, what kind of value will ICH carry in this fourth industrial revolution? How should it be reassessed and reevaluated in this very new world of the fourth industrial revolution? So that was the question for Ms. Han.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I mean we see in we are living in an incredibly fast changing world. And then we see all this new so-called culture coming up. In the perspective of in the definition of UNESCO, ICH has a pretty specific definition. It has to be lived within a community. It is practiced by a community, and that is something that being transmitted from one generation to the next. So of course, I mean, the ICH now facing a lot of risks of being disappear because of all these new emerging interest in technology, on this new living context where people leave their village and go to the cities and don't grow up and don't spend as much time in the community with their families. So safeguarding intangible cultural heritage remains a very important factor. And then that's why one big part of UNESCO's work under the 2003 convention is to encourage to work with different member states, different communities to safeguard their heritage. But then we also acknowledge the fact the convention does acknowledge the facts that the ICH, it only continues to live on when it has a meaning in the community. Within this context of fast changing, if some ICH element it starts losing its meanings, it will eventually die. There's a life cycle of the ICH. It doesn't live on forever. And there will be new elements, new ICH elements coming up. And maybe, I don't know, I'm just making it up. If, like, say, suddenly there would be this youth community now having on this ritual related to their AI, robotics, or whatever, and then they continue to practice it and it has a meaning in their life, and maybe eventually that would start having the resonance to this definition of ICH that UNESCO defines, and we don't exclude that. But as long as the ICH it meets on this definition according to the convention, and we should try to safeguard it through all the measures, to on the ways that we can, so that we can continue to maintain the richness of our cultural diversity. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for those comments. The safeguarding
발전을
and
그
also
새로운
for
문화의
sustainability,
형성이라는
we've
어떤
talked about
개념에서
ICH, but also
말씀을
about the
드렸습니다.
meaning that it carries and
그다음
that
두
this
번째
meaning should
질문으로요.
persist. So moving on
조세핀
to the
잘레
next question goes
선생님께
to Miss
질문이
Josephine
들어왔네요.
Jale.
이렇게 들어왔습니다.
So this
조지타운
is the
헤리티지
question.
축제를 통해서
Through the festival of
학생들에게
GTWHI,
어떤 교육적 효과가
what kind of
있었는지
benefits in
궁금합니다.
learning was offered in the process of these festivals?
문화축제가 교육정보로
So the
쓰일
cultural
수 있는지
celebrations, can it really be used
실질적인
as
효과가
a
궁금합니다.
tool
이렇게
for teaching? I would like to understand, was it really impactful and was it
될까요?
effective for the students' learning?
Okay. Yes, thank you for the question. So, yes, through our programs, for example, cultural celebrations, it has been conducted with a team since 2013 onwards. But before that, it has been conducted as well, but only for one day. But after that, we prolonged it to 3 days and sometimes more, over 2 weeks, just that programs are spaced out. And yes, we feel that it, the aim is to educate the public, adults, children, community stakeholders, our partners, the local communities. First, on Professional Heritage Incorporated, our organization. Most people may not understand what we are doing. So one way through events, programs, big programs like Georgetown Heritage celebrations, we will get to know more about us, our programs, our efforts in safeguarding the cultural heritage, the traditions that families, locals have been practicing over the years. So, for example, let's say my family, we celebrate Christmas. For us, it's a tradition, but don't really see it as cultural heritage because we are so used to it for region and so on. I mean, since I was a young girl with my family, and Christmas is like Christmas tree, presents, food, parents will be cooking. So this is cultural heritage. But most people do not understand that even within their own homes, they have such practices, traditions that they've been conducting over the years. And our cultural celebrations, the cultural heritage celebrations, we make cultural heritage simplified in a layman's term, in which everyone will be able to understand where they come from, what they're doing right now, safeguard the tradition and heritage, and what they can do to bring it forward, to carry it forward, so that and to ensure that their children as well would be practicing it as they grow up from when they are young until they're teenagers and even when they get married and all. So that's this is how we try to do our programs, and especially for the national heritage celebrations. Yeah. So now even with the current situation, we are thinking of how we can still continue our aim, our mission, promoting raising awareness and educating the public on cultural heritage. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very
다음은
much.
우리 한건수
Another question for
교수님께
Professor Han.
질문이 들어와 있습니다. 한국 교육 현장에서
So at the Korean
문화
education
다양성
sites,
교육이 현재 어느
cultural
정도
diversity
실시하고
education,
있는지
how much does it
궁금하다는
take up?
질문이 들어와 있습니다.
So we would like
참고로
to
지금
see the
현재
contribution of
인터넷
cultural diversity in Korean
통해서
education overall.
우리
And
전주교육대학교
we have
우리 교사들,
YouTube and
그다음에
Zoom and
교육청에
we are
소속되어
live
있는
streaming
교사들이
right now.
지금
And
현재 이
the
장면을 많이 보고
prospective
계십니다.
teachers
그래서
are
여러분들께서
watching this
현장에 있는
seminar
그
today.
참고를 하기
And
위해서
so
질문을
they
주시면
will
될 것
be
같습니다.
going to the classrooms teaching these
네,
type of topics later
질문
on. And I think
감사합니다.
that is why this question came up.
그 문화다양성
So thank you
교육
for the
우리가
question.
배우는
Cultural
용어가
diversity
아마
education, that
꽤
vocabulary itself,
복잡해서
I think is quite new.
현장에서는 아직 좀
And so
혼동이
at
있을 수
these
있을지
classrooms,
모르겠지만
I'm not
처음에
sure
지난
if the
10년
teachers
동안
at the classrooms are
한국의
familiar
나의
with it.
교육
But
문제에서 글로벌
during
교육을
the past
시작을 한
10
어떤
years,
현장을
one of the main agenda. And during the past years, when global educational agendas were introduced into Korea, cultural diversity was one of them, and there were many efforts and attempts to do this. So, sustainable development education, cultural diversity education. So there were these type of official educational agendas that were adopted to be in line with global trends. And global citizenship education as well has been also quite frequently conveyed to the teachers at the classrooms. But when we say cultural diversity, so the many different programs and educations, the new attempts that happened during the past 10 years, and some of the aspects overlap with cultural diversity education. So what I'm trying to say is that even maybe we did not use the word cultural diversity, but if you look at the content, actually the teachers have been teaching aspects of cultural diversity to their students. So then why is the name changing? Why are new agendas coming in? There may be some questions on this. What is important is that we need to read the context of the time. And when we try to cultivate and foster the talent of the future, the skills that may be required of them may change as time passes. And how to better and more effectively foster those skills in students may change and evolve as time passes as well. So maybe what is being practiced currently as cultural diversity education may be limited. So the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism have designated some pilot schools on cultural diversity education, and they have been consulting them around 1 year, and there have been some visible achievements there. But the content and the issues regarding cultural diversity, I believe we are facing some of them, but we need to expand them in the future. There has been various, extensive efforts in cultural diversity education, also global citizenship education. So the domain of cultural diversity has been an important agenda for some time now. So we need to continue that. But from the students' perspective, when we talk about cultural diversity, we need to make sure that they don't think that it is someone else's stories. Or we need to make sure that they don't view this in a paternalistic way, that they are um, accepting the culture of others, is that we need to make sure that they think of culture as equal cultures, and that different cultures can be introduced into our culture to evolve new cultures, and that it can all enrich our society and overall culture. So the teachers in classrooms, when there is a new teaching agenda or when the changes are made in agenda, not to be too stressed, but try to understand the overall trend or the background, why these names are changing, and focus on what is most important. I have the next question right ready for me, and I think that is next. I will go to Ms. Jung Bik-han.
There's a question for Ms. Han. Currently, at the Education for Jeollabuk-do, they have a education program on community. They have small schools, and what happens is the local teachers put together this program for themselves for these very small schools. So I'd like to understand, in Asia, are is there an example of ICH education in these very small villages or very small schools, or do you have any brochures or any information or any internet sites that we can refer to so that we can better our knowledge to make a better program?
Yeah, we haven't in all our pilots previously. We haven't really worked with a very small school per se, but I understand that the approach that we have could be applicable whether it is a small school or whether it is a large school. And even in the small school, I think it would even be easier to work because is a much more intimate connection among the students and between the students and teachers. So I invite you. So the current set of guidelines that we are doing under this project are only in the process of finalizing. But then if you look up at our UNESCO Bangkok website, there is a guide called Living with Intangible and Cultural Heritage for a Sustainable Future. And then there you could see some of the examples on how the ICH had been integrated to schools. And very soon we will put the survey reports from the survey I mentioned in my presentation up on our website as well. And in there, there's also a number of case studies on how ICH had been integrated in schools around the Asia and the Pacific. So I invite you to look at our website, and I'm sure you could also will find these materials on the HCAP website as well. And may I just take one couple of minutes to maybe the previous answer on safeguarding that I forgot to mention, that in this fast changing world that we are now also trying to identify digital solutions to safeguard intangible and cultural heritage. So we recently launched this initiative called Tech for Culture, but also with the word to say tackle on the challenges. So we hope that after this initiative, we would be able to identify some solutions on how we can use technology to safeguard ICH. And thank you, HCAP, our dear friend HCAP, also joining forces with us for this Tech initiative. And we will have more information coming up on our website within the next few weeks. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for the answer. Last question. I have a question for Ms. Lee.
간단하게 두 가지인데요.
So two questions. I think you can answer them together.
한국에서 세계
So in Korea, which museum can we go to explore the folklore of different countries abroad? And the material that you shared with us today is mainly from the National Museum. So do you have any cases from regional museums? Can we get any information on some of the regional activities? Thank you for the question. Regarding your first question, for Global International Folk Culture Museum in Korea, I think, first of all, at the National Museum of Korea, we have a Asian hall, and in December, we're going to open a global cultural hall. So if you visit the National Museum of Korea, you can also explore cultures of other countries. And it's not a big museum, but there are small museums with specific themes. So Africa museums. So there are these small museums that introduce different cultures. So I think if you look them up, there will be quite a few that you can visit. And the second, the Culture Discover box is a case of not the National Museum of Korea, but of the National Folk Museum of Korea. And the boxes were lent to any organization that requested to use them. So, and I mentioned in my presentation that we had a small box and a big box, and the big box could be rented for up to 6 months. So some of the regional schools or regional museums borrowed this for that term, and they're being used currently as well. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you for the answer.
네 분,
I would like to thank all of the speakers for their presentations and questions. I would also like to thank the participants for their questions.
하신 분들 너무너무 감사드리겠습니다.
So once again, thank you everyone for their participation.